Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Gary Adcock. I'm the Executive Director for Filmscape Chicago, and I'm a technologist, and I get to do this all over. And we're going to cover what is just somewhat understanding AI. Now, the title also has machine learning in it, because a lot of people don't realize that what we're doing is not actually artificial intelligence, it's intelligent training of machines. And this is kind of one of those interesting topics that we talk about. And it's more than just what is AI. It's understanding the background and the knowledge and all that goes into the technology around us that does what people call artificial intelligence. And it's kind of funny. It's a wide-ranging branch of computer science. And it's really simply nothing more than that. It's an entire series of if-thens. So it's if this or that, you do this. And we've done the if-then, is it a rock, is it paper, is it scissors? Yes or no. If it's rock and paper, scissor wins paper. Okay, if it's rock and paper, paper covers rock. And you don't think about things that way, but it's a Venn diagram of just what ifs. And that's an interesting part about all of this. And the other thing is that it's built to help us improve our lives. It's built to improve what we do. I always find it interesting that there's so much distrust of the future of all of this. And the distrust is not with the process of AI as much as it is the people behind it, what their intention is with it. Some of them scraped content that wasn't theirs off the internet to build their models, and now they're suffering problems. But it's also things to be able to do the kind of things that we do on a regular basis, because a lot of people don't think about that. And AI systems understand speech in games, and it's interesting because they've analyzed this by doing repeating patterns. How does it work? If it's one thing, how do we go there? And that's the science behind it is really just math. And it's funny that people get argument that it's smarter than everything else. No, it's just probability. It's picking the most consistent response out of a large number of responses. So you have to think about that. But the other thing is it also determines which are the bad ones. I mean, when you're teaching a child, you teach it what's good and what's bad, and you tell it what not to do. We're just now getting to that state with machine learning that that's what it's all about. And I point to Deep Blue, because that was one of the first things. I mean, there's some couple of people in the room that are probably younger than the Deep Blue project, which was started in the early 80s, and it was teaching computers to play chess. Simple process. And that's interesting because it repeatedly had to do the things it needed to do to understand how chess was played. And I always look at it because this is a joke, it's a cartoon zits, and I kind of think it's funny because this is the problem we have with students nowadays. Well, we don't know if we're supposed to use the chatbot, so let's ask the chatbot what it is. And then you get in this never-ending loop of not necessarily accurate information. And it's a way to think about it in that way. And I find it pretty interesting because it's kind of tough. And we don't think about the uses of AI today that are around us. We don't think about the tools and the toys that are there. I mean, how many people think of Google and Apple Maps as being intelligent? And it's being trained on your driving needs, your driving requests, what's in mapping software. And they're constantly being updated and trained because we use them. And the data set gets larger and larger as it's used. It's interesting because people don't think about that. I mean, how many people use Siri or Alexa on their phones? You have Alexa, or Google, ask Google. I mean, those things are intelligent bots. We're training intelligence to understand human speech, understand language, understand what things are changing and how we communicate with these devices, and the kind of questions we ask it. I find it funny because people don't think about some of these things. I mean, with Teslas and Waymo and self-driving automobiles, this is a big part of learning, but this is also building the science of how to visually see things. A lot of people don't realize that, a Tesla shoots an incredible amount of 4K video. The first Tesla 3 models, they had, I think it was 6 cameras or 8 cameras that shot 4K 60 frames a second. And did you guys know that there's NVIDIA cards in your trunk in a Tesla or built in the frame of the body? And it's interesting because we don't think about that as something. We don't think about self-driving cars as building technology, but just at the beginning of this week, NVIDIA released what they call the CRISPR project, where they're actually using advanced technical training for visualization of automobiles to detect different kinds of people. You know, it understands that there's a bicycle or a person in the street walking in the street, and they're teaching them to be able to grow that knowledge. It's fascinating when you think about all the things that we already use this machine learning for. Now that it's become the ability to train it ourselves, we call it artificial intelligence. And I kind of think about it, that's really funny. How many people use a filter on social media to clean up their face or anything? We talked yesterday in the Gen AI panel that there's actually applications you can do for finished content to remove a blemish, or in the case of, you can train it on one single frame of what the blemish is, and then the AI in the application and the plugin for this tool will actually remove that blemish every time it appears in the video and in the timeline. And those are kind of interesting things. If you work in an NLE, you can drop your footage in, and it intelligently knows what kind of camera is there. So what kind of footage is shot is tagged in the information, and it's intelligently auto-doing, you know, a color correction, a base color correction, if we're shooting long footage. And it knows the difference between ARRI log versus red code 3 versus, you know, Sony logs. And it's interesting because we don't see that as AI because it's machine learning. And it's something we're using all the time, and it makes our life simpler. So that's kind of interesting. I find all these things kind of run with. And then there's all of the applications, Midjourney, Transcriptive, you know, Color Lab AI. I added Sora and Luma in here because we don't think there's supposed to be a comma after Luma. There's supposed to be these things where these apps change literally every day. I did this presentation in Las Vegas in April, and a third of it has changed since I did it. In the 2 months since NAB, I've changed a third of my presentation. That's how fast this technology is constantly updating. And to the point where, you know, a month ago it was Sora, and Sora was the great new thing. And it's, you know, I can make 5 seconds of video, but I'm gonna have a problem with it. Just last week, Luma AI released their Dream Machine, where you can actually make videos and extend videos and things like that from your content. So it'll take a clip or a frame that you send, and it'll actually like regenerate new ideas for you. I've used it a couple times just to play with it with a sketch for a friend of mine who owns a restaurant in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica and specifically, and it's like one of those things that, my phone's going off, that we just we have to let it, you know, evolve with what the tools. But I gave it an image to give information back to it. So when I'm uploading information to an AI and I'm giving it content, you have the capability of controlling that, but you're also making sure that it goes away. You're giving it license to the company too, because I'm giving this image to the cloud for them to use. I am allowing them license to use it by doing so. And it's not taking away my rights, but it's actually adding everything of it. A lot of people don't think of the benefits outside of film and television of the kind of things that AIs are going to do. I got in a situation earlier this year where my bank account was hacked. And the banking company reached out to me because of what I do. The person at the bank that I knew reached out to me about, well, would you like to start working with our AI program for fraud? Which instantly released a whole bunch of fraud complaints against me, or fraud complaints on my system. I got a lot of phishing things when I logged into it because it was actually designed to send that information out. But it was kind of interesting. You don't think about that. But then there's medical imaging. I mean, one of the things I like to talk about is that as we've gotten to the world with phones and everything, we've become a much more interconnected place. And the example I like to use in discussion with a friend of mine who is an oncologist at the University of Chicago, she brought up the fact that mammogram imaging machines, not all of them can communicate each other, and all of them read, you know, you have X-ray techs that read X-rays a different way. And to be able to compound the information from, you know, the hundreds of thousands of mammograms that are produced every single day in the United States and the European Union and around the world, and start aggregating that content to understand age, you know, weight, health conditions, ethnicity, you know, other food criteria, you know, locale criteria that may affect and help predict breast cancer in women. It's an amazing thing to be able to do, and that's something that betters life for everyone. So when we talk about AI and it's going to take our soul and everything, I want it to do more. I want it to be the kind of things that we think about. I mean, this is the last one, is advancing media and production technologies. That's our world. That's what Filmscape is about. That's what media and entertainment is about. And by doing things like rotoscoping and, wire removal, a blemish correction, text editing in like Adobe's, not Adobe, but Avid's text editor allows you to go in and do script sync, allows you to take something and put script sync on a page, and it actually goes through and reads the individual elements, and then it starts aligning the clips based on clip and take. And you can actually trigger it by the script person will actually mark a popular, this is a select, this is a circle take, this is a reject, and it'll actually go through that, and ScriptSync can read that information if it's properly embedded into it. And then you actually get a free-form edit that kind of assembles the content in real time. There's other tools you can use. Adobe has a great one for podcasters where you upload your audio recording to the cloud, and it cleans it up and makes a better performance out of it. You're sending it to the cloud, so you're sharing that information, but they're not going to, that's not information is for you to use. But they are learning every time how to take out hiss and hum and the things that drive audio people crazy, and the things that detract from the speaker's voice. I go and ah a lot. I can take those out in a clip. I can actually program Premiere or DaVinci Resolve to be able to take those things out when I work. As an automatic thing, it'll flag them. It's like indicate all pauses, and it'll go through and give me a marker at every point in my timeline where there's a pause. And those kind of things speed time to delivery. The other thing we talk about is delivery in this is advanced compression technologies. Now we can compress things not in a static, constant bit rate, but now we can have variably dynamic encoding based on the way the information moves, so that you can get a much stricter encoding when something's not moving very much, and then have a less sophisticated encoding when you need to move the data a lot, and it gives you the ability to make much smaller files. Smaller files means faster deliveries. This is really, really common with Netflix and Amazon Prime and Note, where they encode the files directly for the kind of content that you're looking at. And it's kind of funny. This is a McDonald's commercial. This is considered, when I started talking about AI and media and entertainment a year ago, this was the commercial, and I've intentionally kept the audio out of it. And this is considered the first broadcast commercial that uses, artificial intelligence and the tools around it. They used it Midjourney, but it's also the work of 200 or 300 artists are involved in making this to connect all the dots. Because the AI a year and a half ago didn't have the capability to do animation, didn't have the capability to move. So the AI built the tools and built the art elements in there, and then they were animated by individuals. So the sphere of AI and the sphere of the technology that around it is very much so. And there's been a lot of discussion. I've had discussions with the people in Midjourney and some of the legal people at Coke about what this is. And this was a proprietary agreement between the two of them, is my understanding. I may or may not be right. But it's my understanding that Midjourney worked directly with Coca-Cola to be able to develop this kind of technology to show it, because Coke likes to be the first at a lot of things. And they're really good at that. But I mean, there's actors and performance in here that didn't take away from anybody's job. And then the entire crew that got here, you've got all of this information and actors and the sets and everything else being built, but it's also the tools around it. And this is where AI is really good. It helps build new ideas and new creativity. I mean, one of the things I think AI is going to be great for is pitch decks. To be able to do something, get an idea, or you're in a writer's room and you can pull the entire canon of a series and go, we're looking for something new, where's an obscure character that we can do, and then give me like 6 ideas of where to go. And instead of being something that writes the story, it just indicates on Google Maps where to go. And that's a way to think about the technology around us and how AI is really going to change what we do. I mean, this goes on for a little bit more, but there's so much in the technology that people are afraid of because they won't do it. Yesterday, when we were talking about Gen A and cinematographer, there was a young man in the audience who was talking about how, he posted stuff to social media, and these social media sites, Meta, Twitter, Instagram, all of them, TikTok, would like use his images, have rights to his images. But the reality of it is he hadn't thought about ever the rest of the content that he put up there. How his family name, where he's from, how old he is, all the other stuff that's in there, in addition to all the content. I like to remind people that Salesforce is a cloud platform, and they mine your data. So if you're if you're working in the cloud in Salesforce, and you're using it as your customer relationship management software, you're giving them information about what your clients do. No different than Google Docs or anyone else. It's gone through again. So, but that's the fun part about this. And the benefits of AI are higher security for financial institutions. They can spot scams easier. They can spot bot attacks on their network. They can see people who are jamming passwords to try and force through a password system. Now the security systems have become so sophisticated that we can now see an advanced attack without getting in our way. It's kind of funny that people don't think about these aspects of AI. Like I said, medical imaging stuff, that's important. And again, I guess I could do that backwards. I went backwards with that. So let's go to the next one. AI is as old as computer science. The first reference to robots taking over the world, or machines taking over the world, was at the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s. These new things were going to put horses out. These steam machines are going to make horses obsolete, and we forget that the Teamsters in our union got that name because they used to lead a team of horses. There's not a lot of chimney sweeps anymore, but there are some, especially here in Chicago. There are those kinds of categories. And it's like elevator operators. The last manual elevator in the city of Chicago got taken out of service just after COVID. And I thought that was funny because you don't think of the things that, we don't hear any train conductors. Well, we do because we're in an environment where we have, commuter rail. But in long distance trail, you don't see conductors anymore, and you don't have cabooses on trains because of that technology. And we keep thinking about the things that AI is going to take my job. AI is not going to take your job. Evolution of this technology is going to take your job. And if you're not looking at it and thinking about it, that's the problem. And it's funny that people always think about that, and they don't think about the kind of things. And again, it's AI is designed to model on the human brain. We're teaching it what we know. It's the same way we teach computers to see. A lot of people don't understand when you teach a computer to see, a machine to look at an image. The first thing it does is pick a stereo pair out of the frame. Picks an image on either end of it to give you parallax. And that's the very first thing it does. It determines parallax because we taught machines to see the way we do. And that's something that people don't think about. We're teaching these machines based on our own experience, our own knowledge, our life, and the life of those before us. And that's one of those things that I don't think about. And again, the game theory that I was talking about before is kind of interesting because you don't realize this good and bad decisions. Am I going backwards? There we go. And what we talk about with these is large language models. And the process with large language models is the larger they get, the more information, the more data points you can add, the more accurate the probability is going to be. And you're going, probability, it's like, yeah, let's think of that as interesting. And you don't think about that. Your GPT-4o has created an environment where people are afraid of what's happening. People are afraid of the technology. They don't understand that the knowledge that we have is what we're giving it, how we're using it. This is a graphic that I got online, and it's actually pretty interesting. But it's going to show the expansion of this. And as you grow, this is how language models grow. And you start looking at billions and billions, go from millions of things to billions of things to hundreds of billions of things to quadrillions of data points of information. The more data points you have, the more accurate the probability is. And that's an interesting part of this because people don't think about that way. And it's kind of interesting. This is streaming online. You don't have to shoot the picture. It's actually going to be online. It's actually streaming right now. And it'll be up on the Filmscape website because we get to do this. But it's interesting that people don't think about that, cell phones, the interactivity of cell phones. 15 years ago, we were still using flip phones and Blackberries, and they didn't do it. But with the advent of iPhone and the way Google followed and Nokia and some of the other companies, we started getting phones that started sharing data in quantitative levels. And then it was like beyond belief because how much we were doing. I mean, remember that Meta, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok didn't happen until after we started using cell phones on a daily basis and had devices that became smarter than we were. I like to remind people that you know, I carry an iPhone in my pocket. I'm an Apple guy. This has more computing power than NASA had to put man on the moon. And I carry it in my pocket. That's what we think about. That's what it has to be, because you don't understand that now we have not one of those devices, there's hundreds of millions of those devices interconnected around the world, talking to Facebook, Twitter, you know, Instagram, TikTok. And that aggregated knowledge is huge. And it's interesting because people don't think about language models as being understanding. And we call them language models, or we call them you know, large language models, but they can be images, they can be reference points, they can be data points, they can be anything in all of this. It can be anything across the board to be able to do this. And that's the important thing to think about too, is the data is independent of all of this. It's available to everyone. And it's kind of interesting to talk about. But literally all they do is learn patterns. You know, when you go this way, do you turn right or do you turn left? You know, and if you're constantly turning right. And this was something that came up just before COVID with UPS, where they all of a sudden instructed all their truck drivers to not turn left anywhere because they always lost more time turning left into traffic. So it was faster for them to go right, and go back around the block and go a different way, because it allowed them to deliver over the course of a day, reduce the vehicle's wait time by hours. And when you do that with hundreds of thousands of vehicles in a fleet, if you're saving 20 or 30 minutes a day in travel time across 100 million vehicles, that's a quantitative amount of time that you have recouped, in addition to fuel and everything else, carbon emissions and everything else that's involved in a vehicle transfer. And those are the kind of things that AI is doing already that we don't think about, that we're not paying attention to. And this knowledge that we can do this stuff, and it benefits from it. One of the other things that's really interesting is that a lot of people don't realize that for the first year or so of the ChatGPT world, the only way to communicate was in English. All of the code, everything was in English. And you know, we kept out the rest of the world because of the way we were doing language models. But now we have transcription software that can do this real time. I was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and my Uber driver was Ukrainian and spoke a little bit of English, but it was easier to have a conversation. So he had his Android phone up with the translation software running on it. And he'd speak in Ukrainian, and it would come to me in English, and I would speak in English, and I'd go back to him in Ukrainian. And it was about a 20-minute ride. And it was one of the most fascinating things I've done in a long time, because I hadn't seen anybody do that in the United States. I've seen it in Asia, in Japan and China, but I had not seen anybody in the United States do that yet. And it was fascinating to have my Uber driver, who spoke very, very little of the native language of this country, educate me in the knowledge of his country and language. And that's a powerful thing to learn. And now we have that in real-time translation in Zoom. I have a really cool plugin from one of the tech companies that I work with that does real-time inline translation on Zoom in 22 languages. And the delay is 12 milliseconds. It's actually faster than the transcription is. And to be able to get real-time translations of anything, and it's like there's people speaking Urdu and Chinese, and Mandarin and classic Chinese and Taiwanese and all these different languages all at once. Japanese was the other one that was in there, and Arabic. And you have all these people from all around the world, and the language knowledge is communal. And that to me was fascinating, but it also shows how powerful these tools are and how far they go. Part of this is kind of interesting. I'm gonna create an individualized prompt. This is a little set here but I mean, this is from a year ago. I pulled these offline, and this particular individual was showing how he could actually do different camera looks. And he said, I want to create an image in Midjourney that looks like a Red camera, or looks like a Sony camera, or looks like a Blackmagic camera. And they were actually incredibly accurate to the color schema of those cameras, in both a person shot and that. It's incredibly biased because the woman on the right is always wearing red, which kind of influences all of that, and it biases the overall need of the image. But I found that kind of funny. But the images they produced in Midjourney gave them something that looked like it really came from that camera. I mean, mean, Unreal's doing this and building virtual cameras for gaming systems that do this. I mean, we took the overhead, over the quarterback shot from, I started with the little old metal games where the plane vibrated and the players moved across the field, and moved up to game technology where you were looking over the shoulder of the quarterback. And gee, where's that now? That's NFL Films is using that same technology that came out of something that was built in the virtual world. And you don't look at things that way. But the other thing is a photorealistic prompt. This was a simple prompt, and I actually kept the prompt in from where I started in March of 2022. Was the first time I did this. So, and it's like, and then in 23, ChatGPT hit. A lot of people don't realize that some of the stuff was going on before that. ChatGPT dropped in, I think it was October of 22. And it stayed fairly innocuous online and everything until January. I think, it had a few thousand users. And by the end of January, somebody posted on Reddit about it, and it was like, went from a few thousand to, maybe a few 100,000 people by February. And then the public release version, and it went from a few 100,000 to a few million in days. And then by the time NAB was over and it was May 2023, you're talking about hundreds of millions of users in a period of time. This geometric growth that we have not seen in a long time was functionally like destroying the network, because it's like it overloaded everything, and that's when NVIDIA cards got really expensive because they're starting to do that. But this was the original Firefly beta that allowed me to do it and gave me different versions. And this was one of the original versions I actually liked. A very illustrative, not very real, pretty interesting. And it's a nice picture. It's like, it was good for the illustration. And this is one of those things about image generation that I think is going to be really popular. If you're doing, if you're trying to do a proposal, if you're trying to do a lookbook, you can now create those artificially, and it doesn't say that picture's from Star Wars, or that picture's from Blade Runner, or this one's from something else. Now you can create individual images that have that kind of look. And there's a website for people that don't know called ShotDeck, which actually analyzes images based on the kind of movies. And it's like, give me blue horror shots, or give me green horror shots, and give me a whole list of those. Give me a wide angle shot of a prison, you don't need a whole bunch of those. But it has this kind of wonderful way to go through the existing technology around what's already available. But go from that to this. This was the first public release. So it went from beta, this was the first public release, same prompt. Much, much better. And it's, it's really, really, it's actually a nicer picture, much more usable, could easily be used as a comp for something. And people go, oh, you could use it in a magazine to sell that, but what kind of mixer looks like that? It doesn't look like a product. So if you're doing something with a product, now you're gonna have to go in and be much more explicit about how the naming is. And then it went, okay, so this was in December of last year. December 23. It's now up to date. It's looking pretty good. It's a nice looking thing. The mixer still looks kind of weird, and the guy's still got funny hands. You can look at that. The fabric in the shirt looks wonderful. It looks really, really cool, but you don't look at it. But the interesting thing is this I did 3 weeks ago. So after NEB, I did another one. And I finally started getting an image generation people of color, and information that related to a much broader range of skin tones and ethnicity and everything else. Because these models are incredibly biased that way, and have been for a long time, based on, oh gee, they were working in English language, and they only, so it's a bunch of people that look like me, and not a bunch of people that look like the rest of the world. And that's been an interesting outcome of all of this. There's more to come on that one later on. And again, this is generated Monday. It gives me a real thing. It looks like a real mixer. There's light coming in. The description of it works just exactly the way it's supposed to be. And people, now that we've gotten to the point to do this, I think this for pitch decks is going to be a big deal. But as we go forward, there's still more. Hands aren't there. The hands are still, the hallucinatory capabilities of image generation with AI is still confounded by fingers and thumbs, and they come and go randomly. And you can actually see it in a lot of the stuff that's produced online. You're getting randomization of individual digits that don't have the same, they're not bound by physics in any way, shape, or form, or how something does. Yeah, if my thumb turned that way, it would hurt a lot, kind of thing. But you don't think about that and how the wrong parts of this work. So it's kind of fun for me to show this stuff and talk about it and to give theory to that. Because I do a lot of stuff in camera visual effects, I talk about NeRFs and splats and that kind of stuff. So NeRF is a neural rendering field. Let's bring it up. A neural radiance field imagery is NeRF. And basically what it is I take my phone, I take a lot of pictures of the bottle, and then it creates a three-dimensional object that then I can place in a scene. Now I could do that before with photogrammetry, or in the earlier days, QuickTime VR, for those of you who actually go back that far. You could actually take an object like this and spin it. And you can see these on websites where people post a whole series of images and they spin the object around so you can see all the sides of it. So think about that to the next level. I can take all those images and then transform it into something that's a three-dimensional object that I can place inside an environment. It becomes an object for Blender or Houdini. I can actually load it directly into Unreal. And then you have a whole different level of technology that kind of gets involved in it. And this is interesting. I stole this offline, but I've left the author's information in it. But this is how you do a NeRF, but this is also the capabilities of what you can do with NeRF technology. And this is from a company called Luma AI, Luma Labs. And they just released a thing called Luma AI last week. It's kind of fun, but I'm gonna let this run. And it just, here she's walking around the object, taking pictures, but now you see this zoom in and how the character is. And it pulls back and it's like, okay, you shoot with your phone, you download, you take all the pictures, you make sure they get top and bottom and everything else. And again, this is what it is. And shoots everything. And then you load it into the Luma AI app, and then you can upload it. But the cool thing is that after you get that image done, you can then manipulate it to re-record the process. So you can make it a moving shot. You can make it a drone shot that comes in. You can make this. And this video is a year old. The tools that they have now are far superior to that, because I like to show where it was in just a short period of time. Remember I told you I had to change a third of this presentation from the one I did 2 months ago? This is how fast the processing is going. But look at this. And then you can stabilize it inside the app. And because it's a sequence of still frames, it stabilizes the image and do this. They have an application called Fly-Through, which is used by real estate agents. But you walk through and do the same thing with a series of stills, and it gimbalizes the shot as you walk through on your phone. And you get these amazingly walking images of how the house looks. I use them in my work, not to recreate what a good Steadicam guy would do, but to show the proof of concept that it would work this way. And it's one of those things that people don't think about that. I use these tools to build ideas for doing more. I'm not afraid of what's here. I'm not afraid of what's coming. But it's kind of crazy. And everybody's seen AI-generated footage online and done this. This is actually from April 2023, so just to get an idea of what it was. And again, this was the Luma AI stuff as they were building the first generation of these moving apps. And look how clumsy this is in the transitions and everything. And now we have Sora and Luma Labs and text-to-video and all these other things that are in there that are now doing it. But this is what it was a year ago. And if you've looked at anything online in the last month, you know that we're well beyond this now. And that's the thing to think about in all of this, that the knowledge itself is accelerating our learning and our capabilities at a rate that we haven't been at since the Industrial Revolution. I mean, this is literally the same thing that we do going forward. This is how these things can be used in an environment for, say, a video project or something. Okay, this is the same process, just a different view. So it actually, you can see it pull away, that's all the point cloud, and then it's walking up the stairs. And it actually moves all of this. You see somebody go by because it's a series of still images. But think about being able to do this in a way where you can actually fly through images and build things. Then think about taking this and taking that environment. Instead of a still picture, you're importing it into Unreal and using it as a moving background behind you, or a textural environment, where you're working with in-camera VFX and be able to get things that are wholly new. And so somebody's running on his treadmill and you can have the stairs running in front of them and it looks like it's actually happening. I just think it's interesting. I'm running a little, I'm doing pretty good here. But it's interesting because there's also, I guess I did have audio. I'm plugged in. Let me make sure my audio's up for this. And the speech to text and everything is very interesting because the first one was, oh, deep fake Anthony Bourdain. Oh, it's so bad. We can't do this. It said a few words that he didn't have in the environment, and they're like, everybody hated this. So the movie of Bourdain came out, and everybody went, oh no, you can't do this. It's bad. It's wrong. And the reality of it is that it's not, and there's information. But then there's, this is going to run in a second here. Let me make sure I play it. Hasn't started yet.
We all have the capacity to be creative.
You hear it?
We're all driven to share our dreams and ideas with the world.
Oh,
when you think of the most
testing it. I apologize for that. But then what it was is Val Kilmer has throat cancer and hasn't been able to talk for about 5 years. But he was in Top Gun Maverick. And all of his voice was synthesized. From 20 or 30 years worth of film, they went back and got the original recordings from previous films he worked on, licensed that information to build a model to do his voice, and rebuild his voice as his own character, as an older person who has throat cancer and can't talk. And it was a really moving part of the thing because I saw Top Gun Maverick after I learned he had throat cancer and couldn't talk anymore. And I was fascinated by it. But he still mouths the content and everything else. And now we have companies like 11 Labs, which is building artificial speech, and the controversy around OpenAI and their verbal commands. Because with OpenAI, Sam Altman said, oh, I really liked the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, and the computer in that movie was voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And then they went and built their voice AI on her voice in the movie and all the other movies she's been in. And they built a model that really sounds like it's based on her voice, and contacted her about using her likeness, her audio likeness for OpenAI. And then she, on consultation with her agents and her attorneys and everything, went, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be involved with it. And now we get in a situation where somebody's built based on referential material to be able to build it on that. And then they had to hire somebody who has a Scarlett Johansson-like voice and make sure that it sounded just different enough to be able to do that. But the audio side of AI, cleaning up scripts, cleaning up audio, noise reduction, all of those things is kind of fascinating because you don't think about that as AI and how it affects everyone else. You don't think about how having something and do hiss removal, or doing notching so you can pull out a specific frequency, or be able to deepen a voice. All those things we can do in there that we'd have to do manually before. But now they're built into the systems and we can program it. Like I said before, the Adobe podcasting app is really incredible at that. And the tool was built on people sending their podcasting files up to clean them up, to remove external noise. Usually it's kitchen noise, a lot of machine noise and things like that. I took a video, I do a lot of stuff with restaurants, and took a video of some friends of mine talking about a book in a kitchen before they were cooking, but the fans and everything were on. And I was able to upload it to Adobe's AI app and clean all the background noise out and give concise, clear vocal captured on my phone in an open, large commercial kitchen, and enough that it's actually being used in a movie about that restaurant later this year. And it's like, do I tell them that I mean, they had both versions of it. I actually sent them the original file and then said, hey, I've got an updated version of this. Would you like to hear it? And then told them how I did it. So there's no controversy in it. But it was literally one of those things that I found a way to make a once-in-a-lifetime shot better. And you have to think about that too, as you're a documentarian or anything. What are the techniques and tools that I have that really, really allow me to do something extra with what I have? How do I do more? And especially when you're a documentarian and you're using old footage, do I want to use, facial apps that will reconstruct old images and take the depth and quality, the fractured quality of an old image and make it look new? If that's what the process needs, I can do that manually. It's actually done it a lot manually in Photoshop. But would it be easier for me to allow an application to handle that? Yes. And that means time and money on my end. I'm not offering it anything that has value to anyone other than me. It's a picture of my mother, or a picture of their family, reconstructing something that I would like to keep for myself. And then the knowledge that goes into doing that helps other people do the same thing, because I'm allowing that access by uploading the information. Some people think that's stealing. I think it's, again, it goes back to those multiple parameters of data. The more data you can give a model, the better the model is. And it's just that simple in all of this. And lastly, I want to talk about something else, and that's the bias that's inherent in AI systems. This is an article from the Washington Post. This was an article on the front page of the Washington Post. I believe it was June 2nd was the date. I forgot to mark the date on this. But it's a whole discussion on how, because of the constricted nature of the models, how the AI has bias built into it, particularly if you're asking it to do things of a person of color. And I just found this really, really interesting. And it's like, and they did, this is Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion were used for this Beautiful Woman project. And they went through it. And this is kind of interesting. It said, they asked for a prompt as a full-length portrait of a beautiful woman. 53% of them had pale skin. 39% had a medium skin tone. And only 9% had a dark skin tone. And the breakdowns in thing is that when you got into pale skin tones, something like, I think it was 82%, 75 or 82%, I don't remember exactly what it was, of the people pictured were of Nordic or Germanic ancestry. Blonde hair, blue eyes, classic what you think of in the old sense of what a beautiful woman is. And not people of color. And interestingly enough, though, even though I'm sure there were a lot of Asian engineers on it, the percentage of Asian indicators in all of this is actually very, very small. And it struck me as very odd that. But the second one down is 39% had so we got 53% have a pale skin tone, 39% have a medium skin tone, and only 9% had a dark skin tone. Now, take that in reference to the last one was, we talk about this, and it's like, if you asked to portrait a woman with a wide nose, because these kind of things come up, and it's like 20% of them had a wide nose. 36% of them had a regular nose, not any wider than normal. But then the 44% that had a grossly out of proportion nose, to the point of comical, was actually pretty interesting. But the other thing that came up in this is the number that had a wide nose was actually much more biased to dark skin tone than not. And you start seeing these things when you have a controlled or limited data set. When the large language models are small, not small enough, you have to have something that compensates for that. And this is one of the things I like to point out in any model generation, because I actually build large language models as part of my business for some of my clients for local use. So I'm building models so an ad agency can have a model of how a specific illustrator works. I worked with an animator to be able to build a whole set of data sets so that she could help accelerate her animation techniques. But these are the kind of things you have to think about, that the models themselves, where you pull the data from, how you pull the data, can affect what the outcome is. And you need to be really aware of how to build models that show a universality in the same metrics that you want to see in the product. And because Filmscape, we're an educational organization, and we're here to bring the community together, whoever you are, wherever you come from. This is a point that I want to say, that sometimes these models that you use are not exactly accurate and not exactly fun. This says 23 Creative Summit, because I forgot to change the last slide, and because I actually do that as for the National Association of Broadcasters. But I'll take a couple of questions now, if anybody has any questions. Oh, come on. I'm going to take the one in the back. Be loud, too, so I can hear you. And because we're actually streaming, so I've got to I have to redo your question. So. Well, and again, the kind of tool you use depends on what your skill set is and what your knowledge is. I tell people that if they have the Adobe suite, start working in Firefly and things like that, Express. You have the information, and for those of you that don't know, we just did a class upstairs just before this on contract information and how Adobe's terms of service didn't really change. They just explained it a little better. Tools, it's a screwdriver. You got Phillips head, you got flat head, you got really long ones, you got really short ones. It's just a tool. Find something that you like and works for you. A lot of them have the capability to do free testing on them to see that. Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Luma AI, Firefly all allow for some free use involved in that to get used to it. But the tools you use, some people like Red cameras, some people like Arri cameras, some people like Sony cameras. I like lenses, so I don't care what kind of camera is behind it. I work with glass. So it depends on the kind of thing you do, depends on it. For the audio tools, there's some really great ones out there. If you're a mobile filmmaker, there's a guy who creates apps, Gary Levitt, the company's called Future Moments. And they actually make an app, he makes an app called Mic Swap, where you can actually change the type of microphone. Through the history of time, you can change the kind of microphone that you're recording with when you record into your phone. And it's a really cool application. And those are things where you're using AI to create environments, like mimicking an old radio voice or an old speaker voice. For documentary filmmakers, learn. And just remember that there's so many different kinds of documentary. I don't know what you need to do or how you need to do it. But there's a company called 12 Labs, not 11 Labs, the audio company, but 12 Labs, that has just got $50 million in advanced funding for creating visual search tools. So you can actually put a piece of video in there and it'll actually search based on what it is. Now think about this if you're a sports league and you want to take pictures in the stadium because you've licensed your image away to be in a stadium when you buy a ticket. Now they can look at you and say, hey, seat section 232, seat B, row 12, he's not wearing any logo gear. He doesn't have team merchandise on. So in the app, because all of it's electronically now, you get, an ad that sends it to you for your app that tells you, hey, we've got a special deal for you on Bears, jerseys or Bears hats or, Blackhawks gear. And that's the kind of thing you're going to start seeing, particularly, and you see it already in Facebook, in Google, and that when you search something online, and somebody used my wife, when I was still married, used my computer to look at lingerie or something one time, and then I started getting all these ads from Amazon for that. And you all know this, because it's happened to everybody. You make a mistake and click on one thing and you get ads for it for a month. And that's the reality of somehow how these things work. But the other one is just some of the other things that go into it. Come on. I make my living at this, and it's a non-stop learning curve. I literally have to check stuff every day. In the legal class, the Adobe legal class we just did with Elaine, we were talking about stuff that happened Monday, Tuesday. We were mentioning stuff, dated the 17th of the month. That was last week that we're adding to it. I have to, because I'm up here in front of you, I stay on the cutting edge, which means I spend a couple of hours every day doing nothing but reading the news, looking at the things. I read stock reports, the journals. I follow threads of people that I know, look at new technology or specific areas of new technology. But I'll be honest with you, it's damn near a full-time job. Just staying ahead of it. It's really cool that way. I'm going to go one in the back, and then I'm going to take Elaine in the front. Stand.
As far as prompting goes for AI softwares, is there like a free bullet quick tip you can give for writing those very direct prompts so that
I'll give you the best tip I ever got. Learn how to do a negative prompt. Remember to tell it whatever it is, tell it what not to do. Not to give you content. If it's not real, don't tell me. If it's not start doing the negative prompting to solve the hallucination problem. It's not going to fix the hands and things like that, but you're going to go in and be able to grab those and do generative corrections on those. But yeah, I would learn, there's a whole subset of prompting on telling computers what not to do. But remember, when you're doing this stuff, you're working on Discord, you're working online, it's like the Firefly, Midjourney, Luma, all on AI. I mean, those are all public forums where you can see this, and there's stuff on Reddit and everywhere else. But again, to the earlier question, how do I keep up with it is you just have to stay on it all the time. It's a lot of work. It really is. Question in the front from Elaine. Mm-hmm.
When they started their project, they probably didn't have as good a camera as they got later. But access to resources is always an issue. How do you see documentary filmmakers like the kinds that are working with Cartemplin that may not have a commission from a streamer accessing these technologies?
Well, let me go back and fill in the beginning of that for the audience online, because so the question is, the process of creating documentary films can last for years and years, decades in some instances, and companies that do that, specifically Cartemplin Films here in Chicago, which is known for Hoop Dreams and things. It's like you have this archive of stuff. How do you maintain that database across the way? So that's one of those areas that I think that AI will help them, because if you start making a database of the imagery, of the clip, of the person, of those kind of things, you can start making a more searchable archive of the data around those. Because you're literally, the process for independent filmmakers, for those people who aren't independent documentary filmmakers, is you watch a lot of footage. And you mark time code, and you make references on time code, and you have pages and pages and pages of notes. Well, now you've got the ability to put that information in there, and now you can say, I need, James, who's the lead character in this documentary, I need him shooting a basket at 5 years, at 10 years, at 20 years, at the top of his career and the end of his career. And I can now, because I've looked at so much footage and put those notes down in there, I can do that. But that 12 Labs thing that I was talking about, where they can go in, you can actually tell them you can literally source the archive. Their theory is you'll be able to have their application scan all the video content that you have in your archive and then be able to reference it back, because it'll go, how many pictures, give me every reference of James. Now give me every reference of James playing basketball. Now give me every reference of James playing basketball at these intervals in his lifetime. And theoretically, that information would be there and be able to do that. And it's back to plain old database stuff. It's the simple need of having to maintain databases, but using a creative source to create, an artificial source to create them.
But for things like cleaning up technology to make videos consistent across time.
Well, and that's,
How will they afford that when they're independent?
well, and the interesting thing is that to be able to clean up archival footage, we were talking about the photo before and those kind of things, the manufacturers that are doing nonlinear editing tools right now, specifically Avid, Resolve, DaVinci, Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve, Adobe's Premiere, are starting to include a lot of these tools in here. The podcasting audio cleanup that used to be online is now, native in the application. So I can actually activate it from within my nonlinear editor. I can auto color correct images and say, I need all these images to do that. There's a colorist in LA who, when I got into the business, he was one of the big guys in Dado Valentic, and he did. So he built a color correction app called Color Lab AI, which is sophisticated to say, take all this footage and make it look similar to each other. And then when it's making transitions, it'll actually gradiently add the effect across time so that it's not a direct, violent change. It's along and evolves over time. So the color correction evolves over the time piece as it goes back and forth. And those kinds of tools are already available for filmmakers. They exist today. And a lot of them are not even extras in the applications. They're built into the tools we're already using. So that's an interesting one. Plaid shirt.
I'm in the animation industry. I came in late, so I don't know if touched on it already. There's a genuine fear within our industry that AI generated is going to replace artists.
Yep.
In the animation.
Okay, and it gets back to the old thing. I actually didn't touch on it with animation, but the question was, I'm an animator, and is AI going to replace me in the industry? There used to be ink people who inked cell frames. Yeah, and then it becomes a bespoke thing that you become where somebody reaches out to for that specific style of animation. Kids shows used to be done, with puppets and things like that. Now they're built in Unreal based on motion capture systems of things that we've already done. The game world has changed a lot of what's gone on in animation because it became much, much easier to build these characters in a game engine, because we're doing artifice there already, that it's just a different kind of animation. There's always going to be this fear that it's going to take your job. The thing is that it's not about taking your job, it's about learning how the tools work so you can progress with them and keep working in the way they do. The comment earlier was there's not too many chimney sweeps anymore. There's no more elevator operators, manual elevator operators in the city. You don't see cabooses on trains anymore. And that again reiterates that our world is constantly evolving.
Well, I understand that, but for us, it's the fear.
But again, it's the same thing. You look at it as, it's me, they're gonna take my job away. But, what do you think a chimney sweep did when, when furnaces came and they didn't have chimney sweeps anymore? It took their jobs, but they slowly evolved out, and those who learned other aspects of the career, whether it's character animation or motion, things, or learned editing or learned other tools, they're that. As a filmmaker, people used to shoot film all the time, and you didn't get dailies for 2 or 3 days. You had to have somebody who understood what was being captured to know that it was going to happen. And then you saw dailies 2 or 3 days later. Then we got, the ability to do live playback, and we could see scenes in real time. And then because of an earthquake in Fukushima, an earthquake off the coast of Japan that wiped out Fukushima, wiped out videotape production that forced us into digital photography. And it doesn't mean that HVX 200s and DVX 100s were great cameras to bring in the dawn of digital. They were horrible cameras. They had 8 stops of range and everything, but that doesn't mean people didn't use them. And the tools will evolve no matter what. Now, will you keep the same job you had before? Maybe not. But if you're willing to learn and grow and understand where these changes are and keep looking at the future, you'll still have a job in a while because you'll be evolving with it at a very slow rate rather than getting basically going, yeah, you're out of a job. Because you didn't pay attention and you didn't look and stay with the trending technologies. I understand it's art, and we all have art in a different way, but we have to look at the constantly evolving environment. I mean, you know, the last time this happened was the Industrial Revolution in the 20s, when steam machines, industrial processing replaced horses and manual labor. And boy, what happened then? Did we stop doing any of this stuff? Did we have stop manufacturing? No, it just converted to a different way. Now we can 3D print objects. You know what it used to cost to prototype something? It was ridiculously expensive. It was hand done. I mean, in Detroit, for instance, there used to be guys who did nothing but make full-size clay models of automobiles. Now we do it all in a computer, and that computer information goes out to is used not for the designs, but also for the advertising and the videos and everything else. It's just a matter of understanding where the market's going to evolve and being aware of that as it goes forward. I got the hook. I'm ready to go. My name's Gary Adcock. I am the Executive Director for Filmscape Chicago and a technologist in the film and television industry here in Chicago. Thank you for joining me.